Tony D with a screenwriting tip by request. This is a request. One of you commenters asked me to tell you some tips on writing a mystery. So we're going to do that. I had done it once before. I'll try to find the link to the old video, but it's been so long, I think I can do it again. Smash like and subscribe. Thank you for smash liking and subscribing. Check out my books. The links are in the description. Comedy horror in South Jersey. It's the Pineys. Books 1 through 16 available at Amazon.com. Don't forget, Kindle Unlimited is free. Okay, so let's define first what a mystery is. So when you're writing a mystery story, you have a problem, usually a crime. Doesn't necessarily have to be a crime, but usually is some kind of crime that the characters are trying to sort out. It's already happened, or it usually happens in the beginning, and there are clues, and the characters have to sort of sort through the clues and the various things going on in order to figure out what's really happening, usually at the beginning of the story. And then the conclusion is the fallout from that mystery being solved, right? So in Scooby-Doo, which is very basic mystery stuff, what is the fallout? Well, they unmask the dastardly villain. It turns out the ghost jockey really isn't a ghost. He's actually Old Man Simmons, who is trying to scare the kids away from the old abandoned horse racetrack, so he could buy it for a song and build a shopping mall. And but the kids cleverly trick him into a trap and capture him. And then the fallout is he goes to jail, and the gang get back in the mystery machine and go, get really high and then go off to their next adventure. Probably get some reward too. So this is your sort of basic structure for a mystery. Usually what you have to do, and this is what I do, is I come up with the crime. A lot of times it's murder, right? So you come up with this murder, and then, you have to sort of work it backwards from why it happened. So it's a big thing to know why. Why did the murder or crime happen at all? It happened because, there were these various factors. Then the next thing you need to figure out is how the crime happened, because you want to play the characters always at the height of their intelligence. So hopefully your murderer, or whoever it is trying to be very smart. So they're trying to obfuscate what they did. So they want to commit the murder in such a way that it goes unnoticed, or someone else is to blame, or it just is so confused, like nobody can figure out who is to blame, or some combination thereof. So really the mystery starts with you figuring out what the crime is and how it conceivably and realistically be hidden. So more recently I was working on a screenplay that was about a bank robber. And so although it wasn't a mystery, my task was to figure out how a character could rob a bank in the modern age with so much surveillance, and how, in a city where there are cameras everywhere. The mental exercise for me was, how could the main character either avoid detection altogether, or be on the cameras but confuse people to the point at which they don't know who's who. So those are all factors you need to consider in the mystery, right? So one of the easiest ways would, if you're doing an event or doing a mystery in the modern day, is to eliminate things like surveillance, right? So let's say the murder takes place in an old castle. Well, the old castle doesn't have a video surveillance, so there you go. There's just no cameras there. It's an old castle. It's not wired for electricity. It's a tourist attraction, and that's why the murder even happens there, because the murderer knows, oh, it'll be dark. There's no lights. There's no electricity. There'll be no cameras. So you have to think about those things. You really want to think about the crime first before you do the mystery. And you want to think about how this person could get away with it, conceivably. They'll have some sort of plan. Usually, although not necessarily, it could be a series of, somebody commits a crime in the middle of a passionate moment, let's say, but later they cover it up, and it just so happens a few of the events line up in such a way that they're able to cover it up, and it looks to fall on somebody else. The next thing you got to figure out is how people don't immediately figure it out, right? So one way to do it is that, of course, the murderer, let's say, frames somebody else. So that's an easy way. Or another way is the murderer makes it look like the person who died in an accident or hurt themselves. These are all techniques that have been used tons and tons of times, or some combination thereof. You want a situation in which the evidence is gone, So one of the ways you could do that is, let's say, a murder's committed, but when they find the body, they find it inside a car that's on fire, and the fire burns away all the evidence. At least most of it, anyway. There's never going to be no evidence. The next step is you want to think about the protagonist who's going to solve the murder or mystery or whatever. Now, why does this protagonist want to do that? Well, again, the most obvious things can apply. It could be your main character is a cop, a detective assigned to the case. That's the most easiest thing. In the old days, we had the hard-boiled detective in a film noir, Private Eye, who was hired to dig into something, and he's digging into the mystery. And that, it's often a very complex, convoluted series of events. Sometimes a murder, but sometimes, somebody's stolen something, somebody's kidnapped, whatever. But as the first act is the crime, and then setting up your protagonist to come in to try to solve the crime, and that's pretty much the first act. But that's a very important act. That foundation, and all the suspects. That foundation, sort of starts it all off. The second act is about your protagonist trying to solve the mystery and the many red herrings and roadblocks in solving the mystery. Now, some of those roadblocks will obviously come from the actual perpetrator who doesn't want to be caught. But you want to think about how there could be other roadblocks too. If you can commit one of these crimes or murders in such a way that other people are covering it up for other reasons, then number one, your character doesn't look as guilty, and number two, the person who actually committed the crime or the murder has more credibility as not being the one who committed the crime. So there's an old saying, when you commit a crime, or when you're going to commit a crime, you want to plan it from the court case backwards. Like that's the smartest way. So someone who's going to commit a terrible crime like murder doesn't want to go to prison. And so they would know something of, well, what happens when you go on trial for murder? Well, you could go away for many, many years, the rest of your life. You could be executed, capital murder case. But there's a very high level of proof. It's a beyond a reasonable doubt. And so what you can do then, knowing that information, a character can then muddy the waters so bad that even if he's caught, he's not going to be convicted. Someone like an O.J. Simpson, let's say. In some ways he was caught, but for various reasons, and there's various conflicting theories, he never served a day in jail for that crime, which many people believe he was guilty of. I heard a recent theory about OJ. Speaking of, that actually his son may have committed the murder, and OJ basically looked guiltier than he was because he didn't want to give it up. He wanted to go to trial because he knew he would. He would, number one, he knew he was innocent, and number two, he had the money to and the wherewithal to fight it. But if they got his son on the stand and prosecuted him, he'd snap. And the theory goes he had several things that would have connected to the murder. I don't know how real it is. I mean, who knows? But so people are going to commit a murder and then try to, make sure somebody else is to blame. You want to do it in such a way that maybe somebody else could be to blame. So, for instance, your murder weapon could be a big factor in that. So, if somebody is, I don't know, let's say they're a professional knitter, and the victim was killed by a set of knitting needles, well, there you go, right? Like, that's throws suspicion on a specific person that is not the real murderer. And so in the second act, you're going to have all these red herrings, you're going to have clues, and your protagonist is trying to sort through them to try to see through all the obfuscation to get at the real, truth. It's really a quest for truth is what solving a mystery is all about. Sometimes a mystery can be like finding the treasure kind of thing. But as the second act progresses, the stakes get higher. So the murderer gets more desperate. Maybe they try to kill your protagonist to stop him from solving the murder. Maybe they try to throw him off the trail. They try to kill him, so he can't find the treasure or steal his maps or whatever. So there's all sorts of obstacles that by the end of the second act, probably the person truly responsible might, do some things. Or another red herring, a sort of double red herring, is someone tries to stop your protagonist, but for other reasons. So, for instance, can't remember the mystery, but there was one. It was really good because someone tries to stop the detective from solving the murder, but they're not the murderer, but they think their girlfriend's the murderer. So they weren't trying to protect the actual murderer. They were trying to protect their girlfriend, who they thought was the murderer. Which is a great way to really muddy the waters, and because you don't want your audience figuring out the mystery before it's revealed. The climax usually is some sort of chase between your protagonist and the actual criminal, although again, the example I just gave, it could be that. It could be another group of people. It could be that your protagonist is taking wild chances in order to solve the mystery. But ultimately, the climax of the thing is the revelation. And another technique is to reveal the murderer, and then only to reveal a little bit later that, oh yeah, that's not really the murderer. The detective was wrong. I've seen that too, right? The detective was close, but they're just a little off because there was this one factor that actually drew them in to conclude the wrong person is the murderer, maybe someone who's already dead, and then the real murderer arrives at the very tail end to take care of loose ends, so to speak. So it also depends on what sort of subgenre your mystery is. So there's lots of different kinds of mystery, right? So you've got the film noir mystery, and that's, going to be a movie in which all the characters are dirty for one reason or another, right? They all have their flaws, and they're all not great people, which is excellent for a mystery because they're all kind of sketchy to begin with. You've got your sort of comedy mystery, which is going to be a lot lighter. most of the characters that die either kind of deserve it, and your protagonist is going to solve the murder and save his girlfriend before any harm comes to anybody who's a nice person. And then the murderer is actually a very bad person and usually ends up dying at the end. You can have a mystery, like Indiana Jones has got elements of mystery because Indiana is solving the mystery of, where the artifacts are. And then there's, more action and other intrigue, but, finding the artifact, whatever it is often one of the mysteries that have to be solved. In the Pineys, there are elements of mystery, and I really started writing short story mysteries because I was a big fan of Alfred Hitchcock Presents and the magazines at the time. Alfred Hitchcock had a magazine. Ellery Queen had a mystery magazine, and it would be full of stories because I was a big fan of Sherlock Holmes, another great read. And those sorts of elements are great to add into just about any story because it ends with a revelation that hopefully is a surprise to your audience. So a real way to throw a red herring out to the audience is to reveal that some aspect of your bigger screenplay was also a mystery. And you might think you're watching a comedy, but really here's a revelation you didn't even think was, you didn't even think there was a mystery going on. That's sort of the ultimate if you can pull that off. But with the Pineys, a lot of what I reveal is the sort of true nature of some of the South Jersey folk tales. So the South Jersey folk tales already exist in whatever form. I kind of find them or read about them, but when I put them in a story, often ground them in reality and then say, oh, this is the rest of the reason why. This is why Route 55 in West Deptford is cursed. We knew it was built through an Indian burial mound, but why specifically did that, annoy the spirits, and why are they, on a rampage in this particular cursed road? So elements of mystery are often exciting for the audience to read. So you might have an action movie, but there's also a mystery. James Bond in its own way is a mystery in that he's often going up against a super villain or rich guy who has some secret motive. Whether it is to take over the world or destroy the Pentagon with a giant space laser or whatever. It may not be obvious to Bond in the beginning, but the guy's nefarious and MI6 puts him on his trail, and then throughout the movie you see elements until finally at the end, oh, here's the big reveal. With Goldfinger, it was like, hey, he's going to rob Fort Knox. And that was, spoilers, it's a big revelation towards the end of the movie, and then by that time, it's like, oh, crap, he's robbing Fort Knox. What are we going to do? So it's really about surprising your audience. And you can only do that with very realistic red herrings and realistic things that happen. So, for instance, I can't tell you what it is, but there's a payoff coming up in the next Pineys book about some of the events in the previous Pineys books that you may have read about and said, that's a bit odd. Why did that happen? And I gave you an explanation that sounds very plausible within the Pineys universe, but later I'm going to reveal an even bigger, plausible, the real reason why those events happen, and you'll be like, oh, that kind of thing. So in a way, it's a mystery you don't even know is sort of happening. But maybe you could have put it together to some degree simply by, reading the books and kind of paying attention. Not all of it. I mean, it's a pretty big revelation. Anyhow, Yeah, and then the fallout, once the mystery is solved, the story's basically over. Once you've pinpointed the murderer and captured him, then it's, you do the epilogue, the cops come, hopefully, and take the murderer away, or, in a film noir, nobody wins and he gets away or dies or whatever. And then, you kind of wrap up things with the characters. Maybe there's a subplot with a romance. You're going to wrap that up and imply what's going to happen in the future. Things like that. And then you sort of wrap the whole thing up and call it a day. A way to write great mysteries is to read great mysteries. So you should be reading Sherlock Holmes, Agatha Christie, and others. You should be watching Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and reading some of the Ellery Queen mysteries. You should be reading some of the classic stuff so you understand how the mysteries unfold, how the clues unfold. One of my favorite movies, which is technically a mystery, is The Big Lebowski. Because basically The Big Lebowski is it's a detective movie, except instead of a detective from the cops, it's Lebowski, who's a stoned ex-hippie. He's an old hippie who just gets stoned all the time. But he's the one who's putting together the pieces of the mystery, even though he's not a cop. And I often like those kinds of stories where somebody puts together a mystery and they're not a cop, or they don't have any background in it at all. They just have some sort of emotional investment in solving the mystery, because it's not only that this person doesn't have a background in forensics or anything, so they have to use whatever skills they have to reveal the clues. And it gives you an opportunity to put the protagonist, the odds of him solving the mystery look even more grim, which raises the stakes to some degree. So you don't have to follow any of the tropes, and in fact, you should avoid following the tropes as much as possible. You should avoid doing a hard-nosed PI and all the things you've already seen a million times in mystery movies, and really try to come up with something very different. You as always, you should strive for as much originality as possible. And you should, if you really, really want to write mysteries, you should get involved with, there's a lot of mystery cons and a lot of mystery fans out there. So it's a really good subgenre to work in. For whatever reason, I never pursued it much after writing my short stories, but it does take a lot of research. You're researching things like poisons and gun ballistic stuff and things like that. You need to know your stuff in that area if you're really going to dig down into this. And in the course of doing your research into some of this stuff, you can often find little tidbits of information, little details that maybe the average person doesn't know, that would be great for the mystery. And then if you need to reveal how the character knows this information because they're not particularly practiced in, say, forensics or whatever, they could have some sort of background that would allow them to have that. So, for instance, let's say you have someone who's not a police detective, but they're the protagonist that has to solve the mystery, and they're not a gun expert, but maybe they spent some time on a gun range, for fun. And they know something of it. Maybe they're a hunter, and they know something of guns. They don't know everything, but they know enough to sort of know just enough information to spur the clue in your story. See, characters don't have to know everything, but they have to know enough to move the story forward. And everything you put in a story needs to move it forward. So everything you put in a mystery needs, which is why it often has to sort of be built on the crime and be obfuscated very heavily, so the characters have something to pull back and pull away from to get at the truth. So, but yeah, definitely check out some Sherlock Holmes, Arthur Conan Doyle, some Agatha Christie for some classic mystery stuff. Some of the more modern stuff too, but get a good basic in the classics if you don't have it, because and Edgar Allan Poe has his detective character in La Rouge, the Morgue La Rouge or something like that, because this kind of sort of basis, you don't want to reinvent the wheel. You want to write something original, and then maybe pick something more modern. Trying to think of a modern mystery writer. It's been so long since I really read a mystery. There was that woman who did all her novels started with letters of the alphabet, like it was like D is for dagger, or A is for arsenic, and all her novels had a title like that. I can't think of the name of the author now, but she had a female police detective who was solving all these mysteries, and she had, I don't know if she ever got through all the letters, but she was pretty popular for a while. Something relatively current, and yeah, so get out there and write, screenwriters. And that's it for me, Tony D, and Little Joan somewhere behind me. Yeah, somewhere. Anyhow, thanks for tuning in. Have a good Thanksgiving. I will be doing videos tomorrow. And don't forget, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I will be at the Triple Oaks Nursery in Franklinville, New Jersey, from 11 to 4 each day for the big, giant Black Friday weekend and small business owners marketplace, I guess they're calling it. Mostly it's about Black Friday, though. So come on out. Hope to see you there. We'll see you tomorrow.